Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and I'm a maternity pediatric chiropractor as well as mother who has hand-selected experts in natural holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing a colleague, Dr. Gena Bofshever, on the topic of how to help your baby poop and sleep better. When Dr. Gena and I were talking before recording this episode, I was like, Dr. Gena, you're also a pediatric maternity chiropractor down in South Florida. And what is the most common complaint you see new parents coming into your office? Like, help my baby, what? And it was pooping and sleeping. And feeding, I would also say, is up there. And that's all babies have to do. They have to poop and pee and sleep. So when we see that there's any challenges in those normal, natural functions of a newborn, then we want to look at how we can optimize that baby's nervous system function in having normal autonomic function of sleep, elimination, and feeding. So Dr. Gena Bofshever is a leading South Florida chiropractor and dedicated health advocate. She has influenced the industry for more than 13 years. She's a graduate of the State University of New York in Binghamton and a doctorate from Life University. Dr. Gena completed postgraduate training in pediatrics through the ICPA and is certified in the Webster Technique. After beginning her career at a high-volume family care center in Pennsylvania, Dr. Gena relocated to Florida, and she's the owner of her own clinic. Dr. Gena's vivacious spirit, coupled with a staunch commitment to the well-being of her clients, has made her a standout force in the community, earning her the Woman in Power Award for Community Impact. Outside of the office, you can find her balancing work and home life alongside her husband, Bobby, and caring for her two baby boys, Dylan and Kai, and their dog, Coco. From prenatal and pediatric care to family wellness and beyond, Dr. Gena believes your health is in your hands, but her hands are here to help. And for more information, you can check out her website at Dr. Gena, that's Gena, chiropractic.com, or you can follow her on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Gena, DoctorGena. Hi, Dr. Gena. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely excited to be here with you.
It's always fun to do an episode with a fellow pediatric chiropractor because we're quite unique. We're a unique breed. We're very passionate about the work that we do. And it's also fun to talk to a fellow holistic mom as well. And we can I'm hoping with this episode, we can talk about what normal health and function is for babies, which of course includes normal elimination and sleep and feeding and what that looks like and what we have to offer that's holistic and natural instead of the allopathic medical route.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's
talk a little bit about your journey and like why you decided to become a chiropractor and specialize in pediatrics and maternity and all of the jazz.
Cool. So I worked as a fitness trainer when I graduated undergrad. I have a Bachelor of Science in Biological Anthropology. My parents are like, what are you doing with that degree? And I was kind of like, I don't know. But I knew I always wanted something in the health field. And the way that I grew up was I always was like, take me to the doctor. Like I would beg my parents to take me and they're like, what is wrong with this child? Like she wants medicine. It was just, so that's what I thought being healthy meant.
Was taking medications.
Yeah. Cause like, that's what your doctor gives you. And it's like, I'm a kid. I was a lot younger. I didn't understand how it all worked, but, you went to your medical doctor and if they prescribe you something, that's what you take. And that's how you get healthy, not really understanding that piece of that your body has the ability to heal itself based on your lifestyle choices. And the lifestyle choices I was making back then is like whole wheat bread and fat-free cheese because I didn't understand that piece of it either. And we could talk about that piece later as well. But so I always wanted something in the health field and I didn't know what that would be. I had two cousins and a friend that were all chiropractors. They seemed to love what they were doing. They were doing really well with it. I didn't want to go into the medical field simply because I was under the impression that I would need to be late in my 30s by the time I was starting my career because of all the schooling. So I had those family members and friends that were doing well as chiropractors. And I said, hey, let me look into this. And I did. I started out at school, and I remember in the beginning, I was really challenged because I didn't fully understand and embrace the philosophy and the mindset because it was so foreign to what I knew and what I came from.
Your upbringing didn't match that.
Yeah. And so I didn't get it. Like there was a missing piece. There was a disconnect somewhere for me.
The philosophy.
You got it. And then I was actually at a seminar, a personal growth development seminar, nothing to do with chiropractic. And it kind of shifted my whole mindset from lack to abundance. And it kind of opened up the door for other opportunities. And from that point forward, I basically every weekend I was going to a different seminar or event to learn more about the philosophy piece of chiropractic. And then I kind of fell in love with it. And I was like, wow, there's a lot to this. And wow, I have a lot of things to unlearn and a lot of things to change to really embrace this and live my healthiest, best life. So that's how I got into chiropractic. I was an associate. I worked in an office up in Pennsylvania, high volume family practice, my first 3 years into practice. So I got a lot of experience going hands-on with pediatrics and pregnancy. And so you asked me earlier, how in particular did I get into pediatrics? Well, I just love kids. I actually like them more than adults. They're just a lot more fun. Adults are cool too, but kids are just fun and they're innocent and they just tell you like it is. And they're just pure love. So I like to spend my time with them. So it was always kind of a natural draw to me to work in that piece of the industry. And also, when I was in school, I started doing the ICPA courses and just started really learning a lot more about pregnancy, perinatal care. And to the point that now so much of, pictures of kids and pregnant moms, they're just cute. So we do a lot of promotion with that. And so I actually have people asking us, like, do you take care of like regular adults or do you see men in the practice? And the thing is, Dr. Laura, we have a full family practice. So we see grandmas, grandpas, you know how
family
it's like.
Wellness, multi-generation,
Yep.
Men are allowed.
Yeah. And they're embraced. Like we want the whole family under care because that means everybody's winning in that regard when it comes to their health and their expression of life and how they're going to present to the world and what kind of person they're going to be. But it's funny. I always laugh at that. The first time I got that question when someone asked me, like, can I come to you if I'm not pregnant or if I don't have kids? And I was like, yeah, why? I was like, cool, this is working. And so here we are. We just celebrated 10 years that our office has been in practice. We serve the greater Fort Lauderdale community in a town called Plantation. We have a ton of fun, changing lots of lives and seeing lots of babies and kids poop better and sleep better all day long.
Wow, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. So 10 years you've been really doing family wellness. Oh, even prior when you were associating. So you've had that experience. And so now after over a decade of experience, specifically with adjusting babies, how do you first, actually, let's just in case somebody's never heard about baby adjustments, even though I've talked about in other episodes, can you just explain what an adjustment looks like, a chiropractic adjustment on a baby and what you're doing and then what the results are?
Sure. So, and this December is actually going to be 14 years that I'm in practice. So it's very different when we work with babies and when we work with adults. So a lot of times adults when they think of chiropractic, they're thinking of a manual adjustment where oftentimes you'll hear a pop sound that's kind of similar to the sound you may hear if you crack a knuckle. By the way, that sound, nothing's cracking, popping, or breaking, as you know, Dr. Laura, but people out there may not know, that sound's just gas being released from the joint. So nothing's cracking, popping, or breaking, but especially when we're working with babies and kids, there aren't any of those sounds. It's pressures that we're using, and they're extremely gentle pressures. It would match if you're checking to see how ripe a tomato or a piece of fruit is. That's the extent of the amount of pressure that we're using when we're performing an adjustment. And so we have parents all the time, especially that are new to care, they'll ask, that's it? And we say, yeah, that's enough to correct a spinal malalignment affecting the neurology in the body. Now think about how much force or pressure happens even in an uncomplicated natural vaginal birth. And so people go, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And so the whole idea behind, stress is causing subluxations or nerve system interference starting from birth makes a lot more sense when you can explain it that way. So when it comes to these baby adjustments, it's gentle pressures, sustained pressures. And also we do sometimes use instrument adjusting. We use an instrument called the activator, which is also a low force tool. And when we're working on small babies, we actually use the tool through our finger. So the force is even gentler. So babies will sometimes, as you know, will sleep through their adjustments.
Yes, exactly. And, for years I was like, oh, misalignments start at birth. They start even in utero,
Oh, yeah.
honestly. And so that's a big passion of mine, is working with couples preconception, because we can really help support the health of that developing fetus by both parents doing the work before the conception occurs, and addressing epigenetic factors and minimizing physical, chemical, and emotional stressors in their life through a full lifestyle change and shift that's really conscious, to then create a healthy baby, and having mom receive care throughout that pregnancy. So baby is also, especially at the end of the pregnancy, in an optimal position. Because I'm sure you've seen women coming in, breech baby, and even if the baby ends up turning, they have a vaginal delivery, a few weeks of a third trimester baby breech can create a lot of strain on that baby's developing spine and hips that will then have to work on after the birth, right?
Totally. And, you touched on a really important point there, is that the health starts preconception.
Yeah.
It's that how healthy is the sperm, how healthy is the egg coming together. And a lot of times, even with fertility, people are struggling with fertility issues. As I'm sure you're well aware, sometimes it's often like, okay, well, we're going to get the mom taken care of, but there's a partner that's involved in that too. And their health matters greatly, because
50%.
you got it. And I even remember being in school watching, I think it was an MRI study or an ultrasound that they did of the baby. And then they showed the couple being in a fight, and you can actually see like the physical changes that were happening. And it was like, wow, you don't always think about, there is the chemical, the physical, and the emotional stresses having an impact on the body and the development. And then all of those stress patterns stay with us unless we do something to release that or to change that pattern. And so by default, you have the stress of during conception, during pregnancy, labor, delivery, maybe there's some issues there, even in uncomplicated natural birth, then maybe there's struggles latching, or whatever new chemical, physical, and emotional stresses we're being exposed to as we grow and develop in that fourth trimester and beyond. How do we release, or what helps alleviate the effects of that stress that's happened on the neurology, on the brain and the spinal cord, which is essentially the control center for every single function that will happen in that baby's life for the lifetime.
Right. And so in your practice, I'm assuming that you're seeing a lot of these women preconception, and ideally their partners, right? And then supporting them with chiropractic throughout the pregnancy. And then once the baby is born, when do you recommend the baby come in for a wellness checkup?
So we recommend to have a spinal evaluation, a nervous system evaluation soon after birth. And we recommend that within the first 2 weeks. And we give it that range because, it's person dependent. We have some moms that'll contact us as soon as they have their baby, whether it's a home birth, a hospital birth, or at a birthing center, that want to get in ASAP because they understand, okay, I've just gone through a really stressing chemical, physical, and emotional change in my life. I want to check up as soon as possible. Then there's other moms that are like, okay, my whole world just completely changed. You're not the number one thing on my list to get to. And we completely understand that. But we do also understand that this kind of sets the tone for everything else. This can affect sleep schedule. This can affect, not that there's a schedule that early on, but sleeping behavior, feeding behavior, all of these issues, pooping. So we do recommend that checkup within the first 2 weeks for their first eval. So there have been home births that I've come to where I'll do an adjustment, right away. My own kids were adjusted within an hour of being born.
By you?
They both had their first adjustment by me, but if I'm being honest, I don't perform their adjustments regularly because it's very hard for me to be their mom and their chiropractor. I can't separate the two. So
it is hard.
I'm obviously there at the birth, so I do their first one. But then I rely on my colleagues to take excellent care of my babies.
I kind of did the reverse. Like after my home birth, I was like, my son's got to go see my mentor, cranial work, all of the things. And my mind wasn't really in a place after giving birth to be a doctor. But now I do take care of him, and it's not easy. You know, he's 4 years old, and it is still hard to combine the two.
So I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I'll share something about, I have two children. I have a 2-year-old and I have a soon to be 7-month-old. And when my 2-year-old was born, I really always wanted a home birth and I couldn't get my husband on board with that. So we yeah. So we met in the middle. I picked the provider that has the lowest C-section rate in our area. She does all the VBACs. She has a whole team of midwives. Like, she's cool with mom going past 42 weeks. Like, I picked the person that I was like, this is who I'm most comfortable with in this kind of setting. And both my babies came after 42 weeks. So I was really happy with my provider.
Which never happens because nobody's allowed to do that in this area.
Except for, I love Dr. Skeet down here in South Florida. She's amazing.
So were you in a hospital or birthing center?
I delivered both my babies in a hospital. So it's not like your typical natural mama kind of approach. So it was interesting to go through that experience too. But with the birth of my first son, when he was born, and we did delayed clamping, like we didn't.
And it was unmedicated.
There was a few complications that we had with that one. So his story was a little bit different. My second birth was completely all natural, but with the first one, when he was born, when they were finally doing, I did the golden hour with them. And then when they were doing their checks, his oxygen levels were not where they should be. And, so they put the oxygen mask on him, and the levels still weren't coming up. They were in the 80s and they should be high 90s. So, I was like, bring the baby over to me, because now they're going to call NICU in, and it's a whole thing, right? They have to make sure everything's okay. And, if I ever doubted chiropractic before, not that I do, but there's always some moments where you'll come across where you're like, wow, this stuff is powerful. So here I am, we're watching my son's numbers. They're in the 80s. They have him, my husband's holding, he wasn't even big enough that the pediatric oxygen mask, it was like too big for his face. So he's holding it up for him to get the oxygen. The levels aren't changing. And I put my finger on his atlas, which is the top bone in the spine. It's the control center of everything in the body, to adjust him. And we literally, Laura, watched the numbers go from the 80s up into the 90s. And I was like, wow, chiropractic is amazing. I mean, that's better than medicine, guys. Like, it's his body doing what it's supposed to do. He had just come through this, stressful birth process and immediately seeing a change. So my intention was not necessarily to perform his first adjustment, but due to the,
it was urgent. No, I totally hear you. I would have done the same in that situation.
But it was so cool to see an immediate shift like that.
And, I've heard this story more than once, a similar type of story, not necessarily the mom who just gave birth doing the adjustment, but regardless, a baby newly born who's not failure to thrive, but struggling, right? And, low oxygen is a life or death situation that has to be monitored, like NICU. And, they sneak the chiropractor into the hospital, and one adjustment and that baby is fine. And I even remember my own niece, she was maybe a couple weeks old, and she had Down syndrome. And so she was in the hospital, low oxygen levels. And so everything's monitored, right? It's very objective, and I'm just watching her levels, and I adjust her atlas, the same thing, super light touch, and her levels went up. So, it's cool when you see that type of change instantaneously.
100%. Did
your son have to go in the NICU still?
He did, because they had to, go through their protocols and make sure everything was okay. And when you're in the hospital setting and you're in that, I literally just delivered. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, let's make sure everything's kosher now and do all of this. And thank God everything was okay. But with my second son, I was like, I am not going through that again. So I basically labored at home until like the very, very last minute, to the point that like I wanted a home birth. And
I was going to say an accidental home birth.
If I waited any longer, like that's what it would have been. And my husband probably would have killed me.
I had no choice.
But like I literally, when I got to the hospital, the the nurse was like, well, let me just, she's like, oh my gosh, like we need your midwife right now. And that was it. Like he was born and no issues whatsoever. But I struggled with my first son with also latch and breastfeeding. So I really got to relate to the moms that I take care of a lot more going through that whole process. And had I not been through that, I don't wish it on anybody, but had I not gone through that, I think it helps me be more empathetic and be able to better serve the moms that I do work with. And then I've attended other people's home births and I see like how peaceful and beautiful that piece of it can be too. It's regardless in all of those scenarios, because of those chemical, physical, and emotional stress exposures, chiropractic is one of those top things that need to be part of the life plan for people.
Yeah. And we can start right as soon as the baby is born. There is no like, oh, we have to wait for 2 weeks. No, that baby can get adjusted as soon as they're out of the womb. And it can, but if they don't, that's okay too, assuming they're having normal function. I've had babies come in. I had adjusted a newborn yesterday who was 6 days old, and the mother had a beautiful unmedicated water birth in a birthing center. And the parents both got adjusted throughout the pregnancy. So I adjusted the baby for the first time. And then mom and dad also got adjusted because it's stressful being a new parent and or having just given birth. I mean, the dad's like, oh, my back. I was holding my wife up in the tub for hours. So he's got his strains. She's like, I just freaking had a baby without drugs. She has strains. And then the baby had beautiful birth and short, efficient, but still there were strains on that baby. And, she doesn't look quite as well to the left and her latch is not ideal. And so, that's the power of chiropractic is we can go in there, support not just the dyad, the mom and the baby, but even dad. All three of them got adjusted together, back to back. And which is really quite magical. There's not a lot of practitioners that can take care of a brand new family and offer them care. And they all three leave the practice with an optimally working nervous system. I mean, that is the computer of our body, right? So super powerful. And, I'm really excited to hear next week how the latching is going. She's also working with a lactation consultant, identified a tongue and lip tie. So she's getting referred out to get that checked as well. And they can decide if they need to revise it. But these are real things. And, the other thing is I had trouble with breastfeeding as well. And, I think even the most beautiful birth and the most healthy pregnancy, these still things, life happens, right? And motherhood is hard at times. And that's where we need to know where to go to get support.
Totally. And that's, I think being in perinatal practice with, supporting birth is not just the pre, like so many people focus on like getting to the main event, which is you're like, okay, it's the pregnancy, but to get to the delivery. And then like, there's not a ton of support at that point. It's like, okay, you had this baby, now figure it out. And this is like a huge time when you probably need it the most, because now you're kind of like, okay, we're not sleeping. I got to figure out eating. Especially if you have a brand new parents, like what's normal? Do they even know what's normal? And if they have questions, like they're scared. So, who do you take them to and what do you do and who do you ask? And so like what we do with all of our moms, once they hit 30 weeks, I give them my cell phone and I'm like, look, you can message me at any time. My phone will be on silence during the night, but I'll check it when I'm up in the morning. If you feel like you need lactation support or you're going through postpartum issues and you need a therapist or somebody to talk to, or you need any referral whatsoever, reach out to me, because I never want you to feel like you're alone. Like if I'm sleeping, I won't answer it, but as soon as I look at my phone, I will get you the support that you need. And I think it's really important to have a community and a tribe and support, because maybe, this may be a mom that is the first mom to have a vaginal birth or the first mom to try breastfeeding in her family. And she doesn't have anybody to talk to. Or maybe it was a mom that the whole time planned for this beautiful, magical home birth. And you know what? Ended up being an emergency C-section for whatever reason. And now her whole world's been thrown upside down and she's extremely stressed. Like, how do you help her? So it is important. In fact, we, once a year, we're about to have our 3rd annual birth worker brunch.
Oh, that's cool.
I love this. It's our favorite event that we host each year. It's coming up in October and we invite anyone that touches on the birth process. So we have lactation consultants, chiropractors, like we have other chiropractors in the community come into our office, acupuncture, OBs, midwives,
doulas.
doulas. But I even have perinatal MD, perinatal specialists coming in, and it's all about building a community craniosacral therapist so that, and it's meant as a networking event for all of us so that we can get to know each other really well so that when we need to make a referral, we have a network and it's just fun. And we have mimosas, we do make your own salad bar, and we just have a good time. And it's coming up in October. So I'm excited about it.
Well, I have to say, I might steal your idea for
Go
the
for it.
Hoboken, New Jersey area because, my practice is 17 years old now. And I definitely remember in the beginning hitting the ground running and networking, individually with all those types of practitioners because they're all complementary. We all do different things. And I needed to know who to refer to because that felt like a very important role as someone's maternity and or pediatric chiropractor is that when I saw there was a need outside of what I offer. I wanted to be able to know who was the best in my community to send that family to. And the only way you do that is by connecting with other people and not only getting to know them as an individual, but to also understand what they do as their specialty, right? And how it works and who they work with, who's their demographic, right? And so I really enjoy that. And I think that's somewhat unique because I don't really the OBs in town, honestly, if I didn't bring lunch to their door and make an effort, they wouldn't really know who I am. You know what I mean? So it sometimes it does take a little work, but it's worth it because because the moms are so grateful that it's like, oh my God, that acupuncture session was so amazing. Thank you. I have one right here in my office. So it's like, oh, just go down the hallway. But regardless, that referral, that recommendation, or another big one is a mom who had a traumatic birth and hadn't really finished processing that PTSD, now is pregnant with another baby and is having a lot of anxiety about the impending birth, which everyone's going to give birth eventually, right? So how do you address those subconscious beliefs and release that trauma? So we have an amazing hypnotherapist in our practice. And I will tell these women, now ideally do it before you're pregnant, but if not, maybe I'm seeing them for the first time in that second pregnancy. That's really important to address that because if not, when you go into labor, it's likely that you're going to repeat the pattern from that first birth if you haven't addressed that trauma, right? And then they have instead of the VBAC, the healing VBAC, they have another emergency C-section, right? So
totally, because it's the chemical, the physical, and the emotional piece like we were talking about earlier. And I want to real quick share, there was something that one of the doulas that we work with in the area, she actually does this thing called the closing of the birth ceremony. Have you heard of this?
No.
This is the coolest thing. So she gifted this to me after my first birth. And I had a lot of resentment and anger. It just was carrying a lot of negative things around that birth and the way that it went. And I really wanted to let that go. The closing of the birth ceremony is something that in the Mexican culture, and also her background is Russian, and their culture, they do it too. And it's almost like a spa day at your house where you close your birth. So there's the emotional aspect to it and the physical and the chemical. I drank some special kind of heated herbal tea, and it's some kind of something in the Mexican culture with herbs. We went through a whole experience. There was a section where she had all these different kind of stones and rocks, and I relived my whole birth story. And she had me separate the positive from the negative, and then we cleared it out. We let it go and washed it away. There was, she had all these special, beautiful herbs that smelled really nice. And she had me make a mandala, a design, and then she turned that into a poultice because after we went through all of these things, this was going on for, it's a 4 to 6 hour ceremony in my home. There was a bath waiting for me with all those herbs in it. And so then I did this soak where you let your body kind of heal and close. And then, the closing of the birth ceremony is actually the setting of the bones. She wrapped me in, these, in the Mexican blankets. and with essential oils, and there was a massage. Like, it was the best thing ever. So that when I was pregnant this second time, I was like, I want the closing of the birth ceremony.
How far postpartum were you when that was done?
The first one that I had I was closer to a year, and she recommends doing it earlier. With my second son, which again, that birth wasn't as like traumatic or upsetting for me. I still was holding on to resentments from the first one though, which came up, I was finally able to release that second time. I want to say I did that one within I was probably a month and a half postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably like right after 6 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if there's a bath and maybe you just have to like let any stitches or any other, tissue heal in the nether regions before you're soaking. But so 6 weeks sounds like a good time for that.
And, I was especially thinking of this at like for moms that have gone into their birth, where they were planning on that vaginal birth and it ended up in an emergency C. I especially recommend this for them because it was really like cathartic and healing to kind of like let go of whatever expectations you had that weren't met to just being able to release what happened.
Yeah, it's so important. And, trauma shows up in so many different ways. It could be actually like a life-threatening situation or even a loss, right? A pregnancy or infant loss, obviously very traumatic. Or it could also just be like you wanted an unmedicated vaginal delivery and you ended up with Pitocin and an epidural, right? These are all different versions of trauma. And there could be physical and emotional trauma. And I'm actually listening to an amazing book right now, an Audible called Waking the Tiger. It's all about how we've really all have some sort of trauma in our life, obviously of different levels. And if we don't allow that trauma to process through our bodies, in the felt sense, which I think as chiropractors we really get, then it will get stuck and it will get stored and it will create dis-ease and show up as psychosomatic symptoms until we process it through our bodies. So I felt that was fascinating. And it also showed to me, like when we adjust a patient, how they do feel less anxious. And maybe it's not a direct, like, okay, we're processing this horrific, incident that happened when you were 10 years old. And it's like a psychiatrist who understands this might do. But what he's talking about is in the animal kingdom, when animals have trauma, like let's say they're getting ready to die from a predator, right? And then they don't. They go into a shock state, that freeze section of the nervous system. And then they end up escaping because the predator thinks they're dead. And this does happen. They actually will look dead because that's part of their last chance at surviving. And it sometimes works. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it works. But regardless, if it does work, let's say the animal drags them back to where their cubs are and then gets distracted and they get to run away, they actually survive that near-death experience. And once it's safe for them to do that, they will tremble to literally get that stuck energy out of their body. And once that trembling is gone, they're good as new. They're not holding on to any fear, any pain, anything from that previous. It's like it's never happened.
So we just got to shake it off.
We have to shake it off. We have to, our nervous system, and this is like universal. Humans are animals too. Universal in the animal kingdom. We all have different types of trauma, and we do not want to allow our nervous system to get to this stuck energy, is the way the psychiatrist calls it. And we get it out. And so it's through our bodies that we get this trauma out. And, it's just very fascinating. Like he's giving examples where people will see their trauma, right? And have these flashbacks or whatever. And they need to literally, have almost like a different version. It's almost changing out that subconscious pattern of like, this happened to me, I'm a victim, blah, 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 to like, no, I'm changing that story of what happened so that you are the winner, you're the hero, and then you can move on from that. And not be stuck in shame and disappointment and whatever. It's amazing.
Well, that sounds really cool. Perception is everything. And one of the things you touched on, how we refer to that in chiropractic is a stress pattern, right? So when we're talking about babies, I know we originally started out, we wanted to talk about like pooping and sleeping. So if we have a stress pattern, it doesn't have to necessarily show up because of trauma. Like birth in itself, even uncomplicated births, have chemical, physical, and emotional stresses, like we said earlier.
We can call it a
Associated with them.
strain on the baby's alignment, right?
Sure. Or tension versus ease. And when there's a lack of ease in the system, anywhere between that brain body connection through the spinal cord and nerves, then it can affect how well the body can heal, feel, function, but most importantly, adapt. And our adaptability is our ability to heal. So, you can have two people going through the same environment. One person adapts really well. It doesn't matter if they come across some germ or whatever, they're going to do really fine. And someone else that can't adapt as well, maybe now they're sick and ill and have these other issues going on. So it's that adaptability that you have based on your stress patterns or your strain that you've been exposed to, and then what actually releases that. And that's where the chiropractic adjustment comes in. So when we're doing an assessment on the whole neurology, on the neurologic system between brain, spinal cord, and nerves, if there's an area of disconnect, what we call a subluxation, an area of interference, instead of the signal clearly coming through, the signal comes through muffled like this. So you're still alive and you're still doing things, but maybe you're not doing them at 100%. So now your body has a harder time adapting and healing on its own. And this is where a lot of times, maybe a symptom's first showing up. But what about if you have that muffled signal coming through and there's not yet a symptom? Well, who checks for that? That's really what we're doing from a proactive approach when it comes to health. That's why we recommend that spinal checkup for that baby starting from day one, whether they've had a traumatic experience, whether they're constipated or having a torticollis, having colic and reflux or latching issues or not. Maybe they're having absolutely no issues whatsoever, but let's still do an assessment. So we're not waiting for a problem to then treat a problem, because that's the opposite. That's not a vitalistic approach. It's a vitalistic approach is being proactive so that the need for medication and surgery becomes less and less, because the body's better able to adapt on its own. And that is what our bodies are designed to do from birth. Your body's designed to heal itself. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. Your body is designed to heal itself. But the problem is when we have too much of that stress overload, then the system starts to wreak havoc. And that's where we need to look outside in instead of inside out when it comes to healing.
Totally. That is it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most adaptable, right?
Sure.
If we can adapt, because life is inevitably going to change, right? And if we can be really comfortable with change and uncertainty and have the ability to adapt well and teach that and model that for our children, then we're really setting ourselves and them up for success and how we, our entire life, how we move, how we think, how we eat, how we feel, all boils down to that. But what we do find is if there is those misalignments, then it will make it harder for our nervous system to adapt. And that's why preventive care, maintenance care can be so important. So to your point, like a baby coming in who has no symptoms, we can still do a wellness checkup and we may not have to see them very often. Like, what do you recommend? Like maybe once a month or every 2 weeks?
So for general wellness for babies that are asymptomatic, plus we do neuroscans in the office. So if their scan is clear and there weren't any major complications with their birth story and they're not having trouble latching, and when we do our assessment, everything's coming up normal, then for general wellness, we see those babies every 2 weeks and we'll do a reassessment in 12 visits. But when we have babies coming in that they're not
symptoms.
Yep. Or they're like things like they're not pooping daily. Well, if you're eating daily, you should be excreting daily. Like that's just how that goes.
Can I just add, this is something I hear. So what about pediatricians who are still telling new parents, oh, your baby's 100% breast milk fed. So it's okay if they don't poop every day because they're not having formula. So it's like super high nutritious quality food that they're getting, so it's okay if they skip a couple days.
Yeah, that's not my personal favorite thing to hear. And again, I'm not a medical pediatrician, so I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. But the thing is,
I tell the parents that's wrong.
Like my babies are breastfed, and I just share my own experience. I'm like, my babies poop multiple times a day, breastfed. Our babies that we see that are formula fed also poop multiple times a day. At that point, if there's no stress in the system, like it should be functioning well. And if your metabolism is working
and functioning well is what goes in must come out. The other thing I do share with parents specifically around an infant who is exclusively breastfed, and maybe is skipping, is like, to counteract what they just heard from their pediatrician. It's, our poop is not just what we put in our mouth, especially with a baby. The body is growing and developing so rapidly that there's breaking down different tissues and cells, and that needs to get eliminated as well. So it's also recognizing that elimination is also from, inside, rebuilding our bodies in a baby, like so rapidly that material that's no longer needed needs to get pushed out.
Yeah, because essentially, if it's sitting there, it's toxicity in the body. So the quicker you can get that out, like think about adults who can conceptualize this. Maybe they're constipated and they know the difference between how it feels on a day where they go to the bathroom and on a day when they don't. Maybe they're going once a week. Like there is a significant difference that they can verbalize to you, and a baby can't do that. And so they're just going to try to adapt around that to the best of their ability. But again, if that interference is there, they can't do it at their best. So for me, I don't consider that normal either. I do, I advise my parents, maybe you need to have a different conversation with that doctor if they're not on the same page as you, and ask different questions about, like if my baby's eating regularly, they should be excreting regularly in my experience of doing this. And also when it comes to things like feeding, if you are breastfeeding, which I also strongly encourage if and where you can. And if you're having trouble with it, there are things like lactation consultants that can support you in that, because it's not always so easy. But if like you're having cracked nipples, you're hearing like sounds when the baby clicking sounds when the baby's feeding, or it's very painful, or maybe your baby's preferring one side versus the other. Like these are things that are easily correctable in a gentle, safe, affordable, and effective way that can have such a great impact on your baby's health going forward. Like I always feel, I feel sad sometimes when a mom's like, okay, I tried, but it wasn't working for me. And it's like, because they didn't have the support.
They didn't have the support. And even, occasionally I've even seen moms that have gotten all the support and it still doesn't always work. So, because there's so many factors. But yeah, I think when you say you're trying and you're doing it alone, that is sad when that breastfeeding relationship ends, because the mother is unsupported and so overwhelmed and exhausted that she's just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't try anymore. And that's where having, lactation consultants so helpful. And a lot of times it's not going to just be the one you meet at the hospital, but you can have somebody, privately come to your home afterwards, once you're home, to help over those next few days and even weeks. Certainly working with a pediatric chiropractor. Here in our practice, we're also craniopaths. So we're doing a lot of work on the alignment of the skull and the TMJ, and how that all connects to the biomechanics of latch, and really understanding also like tongue and lip ties, and then bringing in a practitioner who does laser revisions as needed. So it's once again a team approach. And it's really supporting that dyad, right? And what do you need to have to thrive, for these moms that are like nursing, inefficiently, and then they're pumping, and then they're, it's like all they're doing 24/7 is feeding, and it's just, it's not sustainable. And then you also see postpartum mood disorders that can come from that, because it's so overwhelming and they're not getting the support they need. So I think anybody listening, if you're feeling like that, there is support out there. And, so many people are there to help support you. And if even with support, it doesn't work, that's okay too. There's no shame here. If it doesn't work for your family, it's really understanding what's best for you and your family. And I think that's the other thing, is really empowering women during the pregnancy and birth process. So then now as a new mom, you feel really clear, like this is what's best for me, as opposed to this is what everyone's telling me is best for me and my baby, right?
Or like, this is what everybody's doing. I always encourage moms, and this is even during pregnancy and prenatal care, like ask questions. And if you don't love the answer that you could even not love the answer your pediatric chiropractor is giving you,
Sure.
Your pediatrician, whoever it is, if you don't love the answer, you don't feel like they're actually hearing you and listening to your questions, then it's time to find a new one. And that's okay. Like, not everybody's the right fit. It doesn't matter at what stage you're at. And for those moms and dads out there that we were talking about that like don't have that support, I did a talk once that was called Everybody Needs One Great Everything. So, when someone's like, okay, I got the best dentist, I have the best personal trainer. Well, you should also have the best chiropractor for you and your family. Like, it's that essential to your overall health and well-being.
Yes.
And I really do think if you're in the family stages, then you really need to have your best family chiropractor. And there's a whole network out there that we're here to provide support. So it's not just what happens when you're on the table getting an adjustment, receiving that in the office, but we want to help you the best way possible.
And it's like the entire lifestyle, right? It's like everything you're doing outside of our office that's going to impact how well you hold your alignment. Totally. And how your nervous system is adapting, right? So I know that is a big part of family wellness chiropractors is education and referrals when needed, but just really support, right? I think that is a big word here is and I hear this from you as well, that we pride ourselves in the amount of support that we give the families in our practice because we take it personal and we've had our own personal experiences as moms, but even just as, healthcare leaders in our community for families, like we have a network and we know who to connect with. It's like, hey, if I need to get somebody on the phone, another practitioner, then I can call them. And, this is powerful to have that type of network available. And that is, to me, ultimate support. And so if okay, I don't know what to do or where to go, you call your family chiropractor and they're going to help get you where you need and give you support along the way.
And when we adjust your baby, they're going to sleep better and they're going to poop better.
Can you talk a little bit about how chiropractic adjustments impact sleep for a baby?
Sure. So when it comes to the neurology, when you're getting adjusted, it helps the body get into more of a parasympathetic state. And the parasympathetic part of the nervous system is that feed and breathe, rest and digest. So it's, again, taking that body from more of that state of tension and dis-ease back into a state of ease. And when you're in a state of ease, that means the body can kind of let go, relax, and receive. And so when you're helping to allow for that release of that effect of stress on the body, now the body wants to heal. And that's where, oftentimes we'll see like the baby will do like a deep, longer nap, or they'll do a longer stretch of sleep at night. And we usually encourage the parents. In the beginning, everyone's like, well, every 2 to 3 hours they have to eat. Well, not right after their first adjustment, because usually they'll do a longer stretch and you want to allow their body to heal during that time. And then when they wake up, pick right back up where you were. But usually babies will have like a big blowout on their way home and they'll be like, oh my God, they slept like twice as long and I got some sleep. And that's a normal part of the healing process for them. And
that is normal. I that type of thing I associate it with, like, if your computer's acting a little weird, what do? You shut it down and then you give it a few minutes to chill and then you turn it back on. So a chiropractic adjustment on a stressed nervous system is like the reboot button. And when you reboot something, it does need to shut off completely. It literally, so that's where you're sleeping. I remember every time I adjust my sister, even as an adult, she's like, I got to go lay down for a few minutes. Like, that was the reboot for her nervous system. Some people immediately have more energy after an adjustment, but babies definitely will sleep usually immediately right after their adjustment. Maybe they want to eat a little bit and then they sleep, longer nap. And then that does lead to better sleep at night, better naps during the day, because of that nervous system component that you mentioned. That sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is more in balance. And therefore they don't have to be in that stressed fight or flight, because babies can even be in that state as well. And we want to get them out of that. And I think one more thing I want to mention is when we see a stressed baby, an irritable baby, a baby who's just really not is not able to be at ease. Part of that is their alignment and nervous system, but a big part of that is their mother's nervous system function. And so we really want to be aware as moms that, especially babies, they are not able to regulate their own nervous system, and they're very dependent on the people closest around them to co-regulate. So that's why moms and dads also need to be under care and to be able to have their nervous system be calm so that their baby can also feel safe It's like, why is mom anxious? Why is mom all like wired? And, why the baby's sensing that from the mom and doesn't know, like maybe we're not safe. Maybe there's a tiger outside of our cave, right? Like, so this is real. And this is like, so it's like, how do we help our babies feel calm? We practice mama self-care.
Love it. And that's what we're all about.
That's what we're all about. Any last thoughts before we get off the call?
Have a checkup. Go see a chiropractor, get your spine checked, and make sure, how well are you functioning?
Thank you, Dr. Gena.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I had a lot of fun today recording this audio with Dr. Gena. Her and I have a lot in common, and we both firmly feel very passionate about educating and empowering women and mothers because they're the leaders of healthcare in their families to know what different options are available for them and really feeling well and thriving, especially through that perinatal phase of a woman's life, which can have additional physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual stressors involved. And really how to also help support babies and children with getting the best start in their life with their growth, development, and normal natural function, and really separating what's common as far as symptoms go to what's normal and recognizing that symptoms are not normal, but their bodies cry for help. And we need to listen and support, especially that baby and child, in not only just alleviating those symptoms, but addressing the root cause. All right. I hope you enjoy this. And if you are thinking about getting pregnant and are preparing for a healthy pregnancy and an empowered birth experience, please check out my website at drlaurabrayton.com so you can find out more about my Brayton birth method, which is preconception education, as well as my pregnancy birth documentary and some other great information about improving your fertility.